Hello everybody, in this tutorial we will learn how to create Firebase multi-user login and registration, and also how to link an existing user account with one or more federated authentication providers. As you can allow users to sign into your app using multiple authentication providers by linking authentication credentials to an existing user account. In Firebase, users are identifiable by the same Firebase user ID of the authentication providers they used to sign in. As shown in our example here, when the user installs app for the first time, he can register with one of provided authentication providers in our app, like email and password or registration by Facebook. The first registration method will be the basic authentication method to sign in. If the user started with Facebook provider and after successful registration and login, here the user will be directed to the start activity where he can link the other provider to his basic authentication provider. After that, the user can use the two authentication providers to sign in, like here. Here I will use email password provider, and to link the account has linked successfully. And when we return to the Firebase to refresh the authentications, here we will see the linked account, and the basic account will receive email notification to notify the user that his account has changed to the linked account. In database, we will find the two references for users and linked users. Also, in this tutorial you will learn how to manage user behavior, as the user may use Facebook login button before registration by Facebook. Moreover, the user may register the two authentication providers with the same email address. You will learn how to deal with these issues. The other side is how to organize Firebase database to save each authentication provider data of the user to the database. Please listen to the tutorial to the end and follow up each step of the tutorial. Please like, share and subscribe to Android Hands channel. If it is the first time to you to watch my Firebase tutorial, the above top right card will direct you to the first video of the tutorial. The tutorial has divided into two parts. The first part is how to add Facebook login and registration to your app. The second part is how to link multiple authentication providers. We will start from Facebook developer site. To add our Android Studio project to a new Facebook app, open your browser and go to developers.facebook.com. and if it is first time to use the developers facebook.com site, you need to register as developer by your Facebook account. Then go to my apps and create. Select for everything else. We need to use Facebook login. Add app name. Then create app ID. Now we need to copy the app secret. It requires password, and copy the app secret and paste it here. Now copy the OAuth notification. We need to add it and click save. Go to Firebase again and choose dashboard, and we need to add products. We need to set up the Facebook login. Go to settings, basic, advanced, click on Facebook settings, click on Facebook login and click settings. In the section of valid authentication redirect to URIs, copy the URL and click save changes. Click quick start, select Android, click next. Now we here to set up the Gradle files. Copy Maven Central dependency and paste it in build script repository of project level Gradle file here. And Facebook SDK dependency implementation, we need to copy it in module level Gradle file and click sync now. After that, copy this import to each activity you will use Facebook SDK. Next. Now we need to add package name. And add the default activity class. Then we need to add default activity name class. Then we need to add activity class name. After that we need to add default activity class name. Here we need to open main activity. and click save. Continue. Now we need to get the key hash. There is method for Mac operating system and another method for Windows operating system, and I have a method to get it for any operating system. Open main activity, and in onCreate method paste this code, and this code available at androidhands.com, and run your app and open logit. After app run, copy paste the key hash name and paste it here to search on it. This is the key hash of your project. Copy paste it and paste it here and click save. Then click continue. And enable single sign-in on and click save. Then click next, and we need to copy this string name in string XML file. Open Android Studio and go to resources, values and strings, and paste the code here. We need to add internet permission. It's already added if you are working with our project from first. We need to copy this code in application layer of Android manifest file here. And click next. Now in onCreate activity, of each activity we will use the login button of Facebook. We need to initialize the Facebook SDK. Just we need to copy this code and add it in onCreate method. Also in onCreate method of register activity, and also in start activity. And click next. Here we need to add the Facebook login button to XML file. We need to open the main activity XML file. And paste it after forget password text view, and open register activity XML file and paste it after register frame layout. So here we have scroll view, I have add scroll view here. The next step is to create Callback Manager and register Callback for login button. Now we need to work on Android Studio. Go to main activity and create private Callback Manager and name it in Callback Manager and import the Callback Manager. Now we need to initialize the Callback Manager. .factory .create. Now we need to create private login button and import it and initialize the button here. Now we need to add read permissions for login button. The next step is to register Callback Manager for Facebook login button, and this method requires to cast the Callback Manager and new Facebook Callback, and this method yields login result and requires on activity result method to override it. And before super activity we need to return Callback Manager on activity result and cast the 3 parameters here. After that we need to, that means when the user click on login button, it directs him to Facebook login activity, and upon the result of this activity the user has 3 options, and if the login process is successful it yields the login results when we can get the access token and get the credentials, and if the process cancelled we can handle that, and if there is an error we can handle the error here. In this step we need to get the email address of the account to check if the user has previously registered by this email or not, and if the user already registered it will direct him to start the activity, else it will show alert direct to the user to enforce him to register by this account. So we need to use graph request to get the email address from login results. The graph request method requires to cast login result. The first parameter is login result dot get access token, and the second result is new graph request dot JSON object. Use this option. Then add the code to execute the request and adding bundle of fields. This fields birthday, email and hometown, and these fields are allowed for the permissions of email and public profile. If you need to add another fields, make sure that it's available for the email and the public profile permissions, else you need to add to array list the another permissions to allow that. Next, on complete method, here we need to get the email address, and this requires try catch method. Here we have email address of the user. Now we need to fetch the sign is method for this email address to check the account has previously registered or not. Here is the fetch sign in method. We need to import the settings and make login result final. Now we need to add a new method for the main activity to handle Facebook token. Handle Facebook token method creates a credential for Facebook provider by using access token, then uses Firebase authentication to sign in with Facebook credentials, and if task is successful, it will direct the user to start activity, else it will handle the error and task failure. Next step, we need to create authentication listener. Next step, we need to create Firebase authentication listener to check if the current user exists or not, and if it equal to null, it will sign out, else it will log in. Next step, we need to create Firebase listener to check the user if exists. It will direct him to app start activity, and this listener will initiate it in on create method. Okay, next we need to create access token tracker. Access token tracker will sign out the user if the access token is null, and it will initiate it also in on create activity. Okay. Next, we need to override the on-stop and on-start activities. Next, we need to add the authentication listener to on-start activity, and on stop method we need to remove it. So we need to override the on-start method, and here we need to add the listener by using Firebase authentication dot add authentication listener, and we need to cast authentication listener. And on stop method we need to remove the authentication listener. Okay, now our main activity is ready to login by Facebook login button, but here we need to modify the tools to change it to alert dialog. We need to make alert dialog to appear for user when he log in with unregistered Facebook account. Okay, let's try and run our app. Now we will sign in with Facebook account and click continue. Okay, the alert there appears here, and this is unregistered account, please register. So we need to force the user to click to register button. Okay, it's give us error, and when the user gets the register button, he will register by Facebook, and he after that can log in with his account. In register activity, we will do the same steps of the login activity with some changes. We need to create Callback Manager and login button, so we need to copy these two objects and paste it here in main activity, and please remove this line, give us error. And we need to initiate Callback Manager, and the same steps of login activity. We need to use that here. And there is some changes here, we need to change it. For Facebook login bot, we need to reverse the condition here, and if the sign in method for the registered email or logged in Facebook email is empty, we need to here handle the access token and Facebook login here, else the message here will be changed to already registered, and this is registered account. Here we need to tell the user if he forget password for this email, so he can click the forget password link to change the password by message. Here we need to create handle Facebook token in register activity. In handle Facebook token method, we need to create Facebook credentials for the access token, then use the Firebase authentication to sign in with credentials and cast credentials. So to add incomplete listener, we need to cast the activity, and we need to create new incomplete listener. And if task is successful, here we need to add the user data to Firebase Database, else we need to show alert dialog with the task exception message. So here we need to make modification for users data model class. We need to add 3 fields for the 3 authentication providers we will use in our app. We need to create field for email provider ID and Facebook provider ID and Google provider ID. Okay, I have added the 3 providers and initiated them in the constructor, and we need to add the getter and setter method for the 3 providers ID. Okay, now our method is ready. We need to back to register activity, and here we need to handle the user data to the database. Like email registration steps, we need to create Firebase user from the task, and we need to get the user ID and create reference for users. Here the user's reference is the basic reference for registration and login, and here we need to create user ID field, username, email, mobile, and gender and mobile. Here if the permissions return the gender and mobile, it will be saved, else we need to make it as default values. Next step, we need to get the provider ID for the registration. We can achieve that by looping through the provider data of the user, and if the provider ID of the user is equals facebook.com, we need to create the hash map for Facebook provider ID field and add the provider ID of the user. Next we need to put the email provider as default and Google provider as default. Else if the user provider ID equals to password, that means the user has registered with email and the password. Here we need to add the provider email ID of provider. We need to cast the value here, and we need to make the Facebook provider as default and Google provider as default. And when we use the Google provider, we need to add another condition, and if the condition equals the provider ID equals google.com, we need to change the value of Google provider ID to the provider ID of the user and set default values for email and the password. The last hash map for image URL. Next we need to add the hash map to the Firebase. Add on complete listener, new on complete listener, and here if task is successful, it will direct the user to the start activity. Okay, we also need to add authentication listener and access token tracker, and copy it from the main activity. We need to copy it here. And also the on start and on stop to add and remove the authentication listener. Okay, our registration activity is ready now to test it. Let's run our app. Okay, our app is ready now. We need to go to register activity, and click on continue with Facebook button, and click continue. There is something is error here. Let's try again to show the error. Here there is no account for Facebook. That means the on activity result not found. We need to add Callback Manager. Let's try again. Okay, let's check the error. Okay, please remove this line. The error because I have removed the database before, but I have created it again and added the rules for database here. Let's try again. The error because I have deleted the database. I need to return to it, and I have created it again, and I have created the rules again. Now we need to delete the app and install it again. Also, I need to delete the user that created because the user has no data in database. We need to delete it and make the registration process again. Sorry, that. Need to register again and click continue. Okay, the account created successfully and user created for Facebook authentication. And the user's reference created and the user ID created. Here's the user email and the email provider ID set as default because the user not registered by email provider, and the Facebook provider ID is facebook.com and Google provider ID as default. The image URL is the profile image of the user, and the user ID user display name appears here. Okay, let's sign out the user and try login button by Facebook again. Okay, it is successfully logged in by Facebook. This is our part of the tutorial. The second part, here we need to add the unregistered authentication providers here. So the user, if used at first Facebook provider, he will see the email and the password authentication to enforce the user to add another provider credentials. In this part, we will allow the user to link the other authentication providers to the basic authentication provider he has used before. So we will start from start activity XML file and add the layouts. Here we have main scroll view, inside it linear layout. The linear layout contains two layouts for Facebook authentication, so when the user click on Facebook login button,